Hey guys, today we are checking out the awesome Torpedo Reload 2 by 2Notes. Could this be a new studio favorite for me? Let's find out. Alright, that sounded really good. So for that intro track, I used my Schecter E1 Evil Twin SLS lead with the Fishman Fluence modern pickups in it on the bridge pickup, on the active voicing. Nice and tight. That guitar went into my RedSeven Leviathan Joker Edition on the red channel for a nice and tight and organic high gain tone. And then I fed that amplifier, which is I think a 120 watt amplifier or 100 watts. It's a loud amplifier. I fed it into the Reload 2, into the amp in at 8 ohms. And then I sent the signal into my cabinet, which is my Grossmann Fatbox 1x12 ISO cabinet, loaded up with the Celestion Vintage 30, mic'd up with 2 SM57s and 1 MD421. Sent that signal into the DAW where I sort of balanced out the microphones a little bit, and I applied a low cut at 80 Hertz or so. That's all in terms of the processing. And then I also sent the line out, so straight from the reactive load portion of the Reload 2 to the DAW, where I applied an IR from the Hesu Demon speaker. So that is the Heyday V2 speaker IR, the main mix, I believe. And both sounded really good. So it sounded great with the real cabinet as well as with the line out. In terms of the settings, I had presence at 12 o'clock and depth at around 130-ish or so, and the mojo switch off. So let me tell you about the 2Notes Torpedo Reload 2 and what it actually is. Well, first of all, it's a reactive load. Real quick, if you're not aware of what a reactive load is, usually when you have a tube amplifier, for example, you have to hook it up to a speaker. If you don't do that, your amp is going to break. So that's like a very simple way of explaining it. So if you want to record your tube amplifier without a real cabinet, so silently, you're going to have something like a reactive load to soak up that signal from your amplifier so that nothing breaks, and then to convert that to a line level signal so that you can send it into your DAW or your IR loader or whatnot. So that's basically what the Reload 2 is. It's a reactive load, and it really responds, feels, and sounds as if your amplifier is connected to a real speaker cabinet. So the sound and the feel is also very important when it comes to reactive loads, because there's a sort of interaction between the amplifier and the speaker, in this case, the reactive load. And I think they did that really well with the Reload 2. In fact, the impedance interaction is approved by Celestion. So they really made sure that the feel and sound of the reactive load portion of the Reload 2 was up to par. And that's a really important aspect, I think, of a device like this. Another cool thing about the Reload 2 is that you can use amplifiers with a wattage rating up to 200 watts. Now you have to be careful with this, as Henning Pauly might tell you as well on his channel. You know, if you're going to run a 100 watt plexi in here, for example, on full blast, it's going to be way more than 100 watts. So you're going to have to be careful, especially with vintage amplifiers. But 200 watts is quite lovely to have for a reactive load, as a lot of reactive loads can take amps up to 100 watts, for example. Now this thing also has a very nice sounding solid state power amplifier built into it, which means that you can soak the sound up from your tube amplifier at a very loud levels or very low levels, and then re-amplify it with the built-in power amp. And what that means is that this thing also is a very good attenuator. And with the cab level control over here, you can choose the level that you want, no matter what the level is of your amplifier. So if you have like a, Marshall cranked up to get a nice tube saturation going on there in the power section, you can attenuate that level and basically use that at bedroom level, which is very nice. And the taper of this control is very continuous and smooth, so you can get a bunch of great levels, very low or very loud and everything in between with this thing. Now we have 2 channels, and each channel is 215 watts, I believe, and you can hook this up to 2 different speakers as well, so it's quite powerful in that regard as well. So it can be useful for taming really loud amplifiers, which is what I like to use it for, because I have an ISO cab and that is all great, but I don't like running my amplifiers very loud into my cabinet because it's just not necessary. And this allows me to run some sweet spots on the amplifiers, especially when it's a more vintage style amp, and then turn the level down so that I can get some good levels for this studio. But then it also works the other way around. So if you have a very small, like low wattage amplifier, like a 15 watt lunchbox amplifier or something, you can use this to boost the volume up way louder than you would normally be able to do with the stock power section in that amplifier, if you know what I mean. So this gives you more headroom, and those little power tubes are going to squish less because you have to turn it up less in order to get louder levels. So that is really cool as well. This unit also has a very flexible stereo effects loop. That means that you can use amplifiers with this thing that have no effects loop, and then put effects like reverb or delay effects or modulation effects after the amplifier, which is what you would normally do with an effects loop. So that is also very handy. It has a bunch of controls on the back, which we'll get into. Now, it's also a very good hub for dual mono or stereo setups, which is not something that I do, but that's good to know. So you can run this with 2 cabinets and stuff and play around with stereo effects. And it's also worth noting that the Reload 2 comes with the 2Notes Genome software, the special Reload 2 version, and that software basically does like cabinet simulation, so IRs with the Dyne IRs from 2Notes. It also has amp modeling, effects, and a bunch of cool things. So that is really nice, because this thing does not have internal IR loading. So you're going to have to do that in your DAW or in your multi-effects processor, and you can use the Genome software for that. Now let's also take a quick look at the control layout of the unit. On the left side over here, we have the power switch, and then this outlet over here because there are fans in here to keep the unit cool. And then over here, we have amp level LEDs. The middle LED, which is green or yellow, that's like the sweet spot. When it's on the blue, the left one, you can turn your amplifier up with this level control over here, or turn it down if you're clipping the input. Okay, so this is just basically to fine tune the signal of the amplifier level going into the reactive load. And then we have 2 channels, channel A and channel B. The layouts are identical, which is great. Over here you can choose the source. So you can also use this thing as a power amp for your modeler or your pedal board or something like that. In case you want to use something from the line in, you set this to line. And if you want to use the input source from the amplifier in, set this to amp. So you can also run an amplifier in channel A, and then a modeler or something like that from channel B with the line input. So that is really nice. And then of course, again, we have the cab level control over here, your attenuator, basically. And then this mojo switch over here. I'll show you what that does in a second. Basically makes your amplifier sound as if it's louder. So that's great for bedroom playing and stuff. It basically gives it a bit of a Fletcher Munchen style EQ curve, so a little scoop going on, and it can be quite pleasant actually. Then we have a clip LED over here to indicate if you're clipping, and then an output level control over here for the line out, and then a depth control and a presence control, which of course you can use to fine tune the low end response at 80 Hertz and the top end response from 4K and up. And I think the range of these controls is 8 decibels, so that is really nice. On the back of the unit, we have the two line ins, so A and B, as well as XLR outs for A and B, both with ground lift switches, very handy if you're running into ground loops and stuff like that. And then we have the full-fledged effects loop with two channels. We have loop level controls, dry wet controls, a foot switch jack with an A+B or A/B setting, a dual mono/link A+B switch, so you can really fine-tune the effect loop to work with your gear and your setup and your cabinets and stuff. And then we have the from amp jack, in which you send the signal from your amplifier with an impedance selector. So you can either choose 4, 8 or 16 ohms. That is really nice. My old Capture X does not have that. I think it's like locked to a single impedance. My Capture X is at 8 ohm, but now with this thing you can just choose, which is wonderful. And then we have two cab outs. So that is wonderful, again, so that you can use this thing with two cabinets at once. In terms of how it looks, I think it looks really cool with these wooden legs on the side here. You can also detach these, and the unit does come with rack mountable adapters with some screws and stuff, so that's a cool touch as well. So you can have this in your rack as well. All right, so what I'm gonna do now is grab a guitar, plug in a low wattage amplifier this time, and just tweak these controls a little bit so that you can hear how they affect the tone. Take a listen. All right, so I'm sitting here with an ESP E2 Eclipse full thickness in vintage Honeyburst with the Seymour Duncan JB in the bridge and the 15.9 in the neck. Going into my ENGL Ironball SE on the lead channel. No special settings or anything like that. The amplifier, which is a 20 watt amplifier with EL84 tubes, is going into the reload 2x2 notes in channel A. And from there on, it's going into the speaker. So that's the Grossmann Fatbox 1x12 with my vintage 30 mic'd up with two SM57s and the MD421 sent into the DAW with no post-processing. And then the line out is also going into my DAW where I'm applying an IR. So first of all, let's take a quick listen to the difference between the real speaker, so using this as the attenuator, versus the line out, so basically using the reload to as a load box. So this is the real speaker cabinet. And now the IR straight from the reactive load. And I think that both sound really good. All right, and what I want to do now is just tweak these controls over here, the tone shaping options basically, so you guys can hear how they affect the tone. Now, obviously, this is the cab level. So that's the amount of level that you're going to send to your real cabinet. It's very continuous. Let's try that for a second. I'm not going to crank it up really loud into my ISO cabinet, but just let's see how it reacts downwards. So it goes in steps, but that's some smooth attenuation going on there. Really nice. Next to that, we have this little switch over here, the mojo switch. Now what that does is it makes an amplifier sound as if it's louder. So if you're playing through an amplifier at a very low level, this will give it a little bit of an oomph, kind of like the Fletcher-Munchen curve. So it's going to make it a little bit more scooped. So let's try that right now. This is with the switch off. Let's see what happens if we turn it on. So with the Mojo switch, you kind of get a little V there. It does sound great. It makes it sound a bit more massive for sure. I'm not sure if that would be beneficial in a recording, so in a studio environment. Perhaps if you're using an amplifier that is really mid-focused. I must say that the ENGL Ironball SE is very mid-focused. But yeah, it will probably sound really nice if you're playing through a real cabinet in the room, just to give it a little bit more oomph. I like it. I like that control. It's not too drastic, but I like what it does for sure. And the output level is just gonna change the level, you know, of the line out. Let's try that just real quick. So that's gonna adjust the level from the line out, so straight from the reactive load. Of course, we have to keep in mind that the signal of the amp is going into the reactive load first and then into the power amp for the real cabinet. All right. Now we have this depth control and this presence control over here. These are very handy for shaping the tone. So if you have an amplifier, for example, that does not have a depth control, like the Ironball, you can fine tune the low end a little bit here, which is wonderful. So let's try that and see what sort of results we can get. Let's lower it first. And that definitely has the potential to make your low end quite massive, which is cool. I like that a lot. I really love that, especially with an amp like this. You know, it's a smaller amp, it's an EL84 amp, so sometimes these amps can use a little bit of extra oomph in the low end, right? Let's do the same thing with the presence control. So right around noon seems to be a good neutral setting, I think. Let's try it with both controls at 0, see what happens. So that's a little bit flat sounding. Let's try the Mojo switch with those settings. And let's tweak from here. So let's add a little bit of depth and presence as well. Let's say 10 o'clock. So that sounds pretty cool with the Mojo switch. And then let's go back to my initial settings with presence at noon and then depth at around, let's say, 130-ish. Very nice. Now let's switch over to the clean channel on the Ironball and let's try something else. I want to try the effects loop just for the purpose of this video. I'm not a heavy effects loop user at all. I hardly ever use effects loops, but it's cool to show you guys. So I have a reverb in here, the Walrus Audio Fundamental Reverb with mix set at 100%, and then the dry wet level to around a quarter or so. Let's turn it on. You know, so that does its job. And then if we go back to the dirty channel, of course, the reverb is going to come after the distortion, right? So that is a cool feature, and it's nice that you can switch it in and out with the foot switch. Right, I just wanted to show you these controls, and I really like what I'm hearing here. All right, really nice. So I really enjoy how you can shape the tone with the depth and presence controls. I think they sound quite musical. That is wonderful. And the attenuation works really well, and the line out sounds great. I think the reactive load portion of the thing sounds great. I haven't compared it to any other loads. I might do that in the future if you guys are interested, but on the whole, I really enjoy the 2Notes Torpedo Reload 2. I love the functionality that it has. I think it sounds great. It works really well. And it's just super flexible. I mean, the fact that you can use it with very high wattage amplifiers or very small amplifiers and crank them up. And I also kind of like the idea that the power section in here is solid state. I've also tried a competing unit from another brand, which is also great, but that has a tube power section. So this is going to sound and react a little bit differently than that, but I appreciate that difference. So yeah, I like the unit a lot. Thumbs up for me. I recommend checking one of these out if you're interested for sure. If you want to buy one of these, you can do so at my affiliate links for Tomon and Sweetwater. I'll put some links in the description below. I'd really appreciate it. You can buy one there at no additional cost for you, and then you get to support the channel. I'd really appreciate it. Of course, also let me know in the comments down below what your thoughts are on the Reload 2. And please hit the like and subscribe buttons as well, as that really helps the channel out. And you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram as well. And if you want to support the channel in another way, you can get something at my web store. Thanks so much to the folks at 2Notes for sponsoring this video and for sending this over to me. I really appreciate it. I think I'm going to use this thing quite a lot in the future. It's a really lovely unit that is turning out to be a new studio favorite for sure, in case you were still wondering. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I hope to see you soon. Cheers!